everybody. My name is Josephine Vanderhorst. I'm the managing attorney of the Child in Need of Care unit at Southeast Louisiana Legal Services. And my ARP project was on youth engagement. The title of my presentation is Empowering Tomorrow's Voices, Youth Engagement in Louisiana's Foster Care System, Bridging the Gap Between Courts and Agencies. So a little bit about myself. I am the product of a kinship, guardianship, and a very strong village of people that kind of stepped up to step in when my parents couldn't. And those people in my family gave me a voice and made me feel very empowered in the decisions that were made in my life. So I went to law school to do the same. I kind of fell into the child welfare work. It wasn't what I went to law school for. I went to law school more so for family law. And like I said, kind of fell into the field of child welfare and, of course, loved the work and decided to stay and dedicate my career to it. So I have been an attorney since 2016, and I started doing this work in 2015. But previously also worked at a group home where I was able to learn about the experiences of children and young women, especially in foster care. So in Louisiana, the reason I came to develop my ARP project and my PICO, post-pandemic, I noticed that there was a decline in participation for our children clients in the courtroom and in their DCFS cases. And so I wanted to see sort of what happened, where the disconnect was, and how do we get back to where we were before the pandemic? Because the youth that were in care before the pandemic, they were touched by everybody in the courtroom, and they had more successful permanency outcomes, and they had stronger networks than our kids who were not attending court and were not attending their DCFS meetings. So I did a little brief introduction of my topic, but a little backstory to it. I really took a deep dive into the importance and benefits of youth engagement in general. I did a lot of national research. I looked at other states that really honed in and focused on youth engagement and wanted to make a change. Louisiana is a very unique state in the application of the law itself. We are 100% client directed for our attorneys, 0 to 18. And any child 12 or older has to be in court. And the only person that can waive that presence in court is their attorney, nobody else. And so in Louisiana, they're parties to the proceedings, and they were kind of being left out of the proceedings and the decisions that were being made for them. So I went back to my beginnings as a new attorney, and I thought about what we did then to engage the youth in our cases, because it was more hands-on and there was a lot more collaboration. And I wanted to kind of bring awareness to where we are currently and then what we did. So I gathered some data from the child welfare professionals, the adults that are in the courtroom. And then I also surveyed our youth and the clients that may still be in foster care, and some of them have aged out of foster care. So from that, I wanted to pull some strategies for us to implement based on what the youth shared, based on what some of the partners shared. And then I also wanted to share some of our success stories, because it's very often that, you know, we know somebody ages out of foster care and they may be in the back of our mind, but we don't talk about them. And so we had, from the jurisdiction that I did this pilot in, we had a number of youth that aged out of foster care and were in college or working really good jobs and doing really good things with their lives. So I wanted to bring awareness to their success and not just their story of them being in foster care, and kind of showing that the way they got there is they had the support and wraparound from people who could help them navigate those environments. So my PICO in a pretty nice sentence is, In the state of Louisiana, if child welfare partners, including judges, attorneys, DCFS, CASA, court personnel, and service providers, participate in a comprehensive training and implement learned strategies aimed at enhancing youth engagement in court proceedings and meetings related to their DCFS case, will this intervention lead to increased youth involvement and contribute to altering the prevailing narrative, suggesting that children should not be active parties in the proceedings? And my short answer for that is yes, but I will go through all of the background that got me to get to the point of implementing the training and then show the data. So just a background, there's a lot of federal legislation that encourages youth engagement and youth participation in their case in general. One of the main ones that stuck out to me when I started this was Fostering Connections to Success and Increasing Adoptions Act of 2008. So this is just pretty basic. It promotes that youth should be involved in their case planning, and it initially started the extended foster care programs that some states have opted into. And so this gave way for us to really hone in on those kids that we kind of knew would age out of foster care. And it allowed the adults to sort of wrap around, and the young people were put in charge kind of saying who could come to the meeting and saying who could help be a part of their team and who they wanted to be a part of their team. And so it was a very drastic change in Louisiana, because it put once Louisiana opted in fully to extended foster care, it put the planning in the hands of the youth, which then gave a lot of the planning and a lot of the organizing came under the realm of the child's attorney, because our client was leading their plan for when they aged out. So that was really a pivotal point of this. And then, of course, the Child and Family Services Improvement and Innovation Act of 2011, it really gave Fostering Connections a lot of bite, and it put more of an emphasis on really really incorporating young people into the duration of the case, their transition planning, their case planning, where they want to live, who they want to talk to, who they want to be a part of their team. And so that was important for me to include. And then, of course, Chafee, which all of us are familiar with, really pivotal in any type of extended foster care and transitional program for our young people who age out. So those are my three that I focused on. And then from there, I went on this really deep dive of scholarly articles and scholarly research. And there are a lot of tools and a lot of resources out there on youth engagement, but pulling them together and pulling pieces from each one, that's kind of the approach that I took to develop the training materials that I use specific for Louisiana. A lot of toolkits by NACC, a lot of toolkits by the ABA Center on Children and the Law, and a lot of toolkits by Casey Family Programs, really helpful. And it was very important to me that all of those toolkits and all of the research was created with lived expertise. And so it wasn't just us as professionals coming in and saying, this is how you have to do it. It really focused on what young people have shared they needed in their cases to be engaged and to feel like they have an authentic voice in the case that's going forward. So from that research, it was evident, which I kind of already knew, young people want to participate in their hearings. The input from those involved in the case creates higher quality and more inclusive decision-making. It creates improved outcomes for our young people and their families, and it increases development, growth, and self-esteem of our young people. So, these are important skills that when youth are in foster care, they're not necessarily learning those. And another piece that I found in talking to Louisiana's youth was they felt like they created a network by participating in their case. They had people that they could call and ask for help to navigate spaces that they might not feel comfortable in. And that made a really big difference for them. And that was a lot of the feedback from some of the survey responses that I did locally here. So a lot of the studies that I read focus on youth participation in foster care and decision-making. Also focused on youth empowerment and well-being, youth voice and authenticity, creating and maintaining meaningful relationships, trauma-informed approaches, and effective collaboration models. And so this kind of goes to what I shared about the data here in Louisiana. Those relationships are instrumental to them. They love to be able to have an open and authentic relationship with an attorney, because now I can ask my attorney questions that I might not have been able to ask anybody else. Same thing with their social worker, same thing with their CASA volunteer, same thing with the judge. And in the cases that we had that are very successful, all of those people work very closely together to help our young people achieve the goals that they set. So that really made a difference that was really a light bulb moment for me when I went through the research and kind of saw, okay, well, we did this. Now, what happened to where we've gotten moved away from that, and how do we get back to it? Which leads me to my intervention and methodology. So I started out with doing a case review of open and closed youth foster care cases from the 23rd Judicial District in Louisiana. And I reviewed my organization's, our own data. So I went in to see how many youth attended court, how many youth attended their DCFS meetings, how many youth were meeting with their attorneys outside of court, how many youth were meeting with their attorneys outside of a DCFS meeting in just a regular community type environment. And from there, I got a lot of interest and feedback from doing the case review, and it was pretty eye-opening. And I will share the data for that in a few slides. I also surveyed the child welfare partners in the 23rd JDC, so the judges, the district attorneys, the DCFS attorneys, children's attorneys, CASA supervisors, CASA volunteers, and DCFS staff. And I got really good feedback from that. Oh, and parents attorneys as well, and a parent liaison. And so got really great feedback from that to kind of get a lay of the land of where we are as a district. And then I also surveyed about 15 young people from Louisiana. I tried to get a focus of cases that were in the 23rd Judicial District, but as y'all know, getting in touch and getting youth to complete something, sometimes it can be a little difficult. So I reached out to our statewide advisory board of former foster youth, and I asked them to kind of blast it out to get additional responses. So these are just youth in Louisiana. Their case wasn't necessarily in the 23rd JDC. And so from that, I also was able to be granted access to pilot the QIC-EY legal training for child welfare partners for the 23rd JDC. And it was a very small group of people that completed it. It's a 5-hour virtual training, module style training. It can be started and paused, and you can come back to it. But it goes in depth about each module kind of builds on the next. And so it goes through and it starts you off with having an understanding of youth engagement, having an understanding of why it's important. And then it sort of walks you through a hypothetical of engaging a youth authentically in their case planning, engaging a youth authentically in preparing for court, engaging a youth authentically in the courtroom. And it actually had, the last module was an actual full hypothetical with a video where they're in a courtroom, and it was an example of what you're not supposed to do as an attorney, and then you had to identify what should have been done and who could have done what. So from there, I also implemented a live training in the 23rd JDC, and I also did my live training, a smaller version of it, at our statewide Together We Can conference. So to jump to my survey responses, these are my responses from foster youth or from former foster youth. It's a combination. So about 73% of the youth surveys stated that it was very important for them to participate in their court case and for them to participate in DCFS meetings. 80% of the foster youth surveyed believed they had the option to attend court or their DCFS meeting. And so for me, that showed me as a managing attorney for children's attorneys that we are not reaching all of our clients because they have the right to attend both their parties. And something either is being dropped in communication, or we're missing the mark on being able to tell our clients that, hey, y'all have this right. Nobody can stop you from this. Nobody can tell you, no, you can't participate. But we as the attorneys have to know that they want to, and there's a gap in communication in that way. Not every youth in foster care has access to a cell phone. They're having to rely on a foster parent or having to rely on the group home phone. And then in Louisiana, like most states, we have a shortage of placements. So our children are placed all throughout the state of Louisiana. Louisiana is pretty big. And so we're in the southernmost part at the tip, and a lot of our kids are placed in North Louisiana or, very, very far proximity from where their attorney is located, which creates another barrier. So to me, unpacking that data, that's what that 20% kind of shows. So these are direct quotes from some of the youth that participated. These were the ones that stuck out the most to me while reviewing the surveys. Why do young people believe they should be included in their case? It allows me to be at the center of my case and interact with all the moving parts within it. When you feel like the people that are running your case are on your side, it makes you feel like they're doing everything for you and for your best interests. And my favorite, my surveys were 100% anonymous, but the way this is written, I knew exactly which of my former clients wrote this response. I enjoy it because it's my business and I should be present for that. This is a young person that was often told that she didn't get to have a seat at the table, and she was the parent in her household. She raised her mom, she raised her siblings, and she was often put into a little box and told, you don't get to have a say in what happens with your siblings. You don't get to have a say with what happens in your case. And a very keen memory that I have of her is that the judge told her that she didn't need to be in the courtroom for what was about to happen. And she looked at me and I sat down, and she stayed standing up, and she said, Your Honor, I have a problem with you telling me that I can't be in the courtroom when you're about to make a decision that vastly impacts my life. And if the circumstances were different and you were the person in foster care and they told you to go sit out in the hallway while the adults talk, you would be upset too. So don't think that I don't understand what's happening. I've been an adult for way longer than I wanted to be, and I'm staying in here. And the only way you're going to get me out is if you arrest me. And the judge looked at me and asked if I wanted to talk to my client. And in the back of my head, because I've been in the courtroom long enough, I knew that they didn't have a bed, so she couldn't get arrested. So I said, no, I think I agree 100% with what my client has stated. And she does need to be in here, and we need to hear from her because she may have access to family members or family friends that have not been identified by the agency and that she has not been asked about. So maybe we need to take a step back and listen to the person that we're talking about. So that's how I knew that that was her response. So just to break down some of the survey responses from the child welfare partners, this was very concerning to me. As I said earlier, in the state of Louisiana, children of all ages, 0 to 18 years old, are parties to their case. These are adults that are hearing these cases every day. CASA supervisors, CASA volunteers, DCFS workers, DCFS supervisors, judges, attorneys. And this 39, 4, and 4 is very concerning because everybody should have answered to a great extent. The youth are the pivotal party of the case. They are the ones that are the victim. And so they've experienced whatever has caused the court to become involved. And when we talk about taking the experience of decision-making away from that, while we're deciding that it's not safe for them to be with their family, who's the only family that they know, and making decisions in the background, and then just sending their attorney or sending their CASA volunteer or sending their DCFS worker to update them about it, it creates an imbalance. And so what we see is a lot in our cases, sometimes our young people are not as trusting as the people that are being sent to them. But when they're coming to court and they know, okay, my attorney really did ask for this and the judge just didn't listen, it makes a big difference. My CASA really reported what I told her. Even though she doesn't agree that's what's best for me, she still said it. So I can trust that I can tell her stuff and it's going to get to who needs to hear it. Well, my worker is fighting for me to go home, but my mom is not meeting her halfway. So that's why I can't go home. So my worker isn't lying to me and just telling me that I have to stay in foster care. I have to stay with her as a worker and not be able to go home and not deal with DCFS anymore, right? And so this response in and of itself really kind of set me on fire to keep it up and go a little further with my training. So this was, I allowed for free range feedback on both of the surveys because I kind of wanted to hear, I came out of the courtroom a year ago, so I really didn't know what was going on in our court. I just knew what the data showed. So I wanted to hear some feedback from people who are boots on the ground doing the work. I'd rate youth participation at a 3. Kids aren't being brought to court when asked because DCFS says they are placed too far away. Many teenagers want to participate and have their voices heard. The workers do not communicate to children on their level, and they can't form trusting relationships with them. I have no clue who wrote this. I would love to say that it was a child's attorney, but I don't think that it was. But shortly after I did my surveys, my child's attorney that was in the courtroom that we surveyed went out on maternity leave. So I had to go back into the courtroom. And this is 100% of what I saw going back in, which is very scary because that's not where it was when I left. So from there, I went to the drawing board and I created an in-person training. The initial training that I did locally in our jurisdiction based on the issues that I saw returning to the courtroom to cover maternity leave. I did a real in-depth training, not only on just youth engagement, but I also trained on what the roles of the child welfare partners are and how they boil down to engagement, period. Parent engagement, youth engagement, foster parent engagement. And I kind of hinted at all because there seemed to have been some type of gap in training in the changing of people in the courtroom. So there was a lot of turnover. DCFS, of course, always has a lot of turnover, but for the first time in 8 years, the children's attorney had 2 different attorneys in the courtroom. And then we also experienced new judges. We've received new parents attorneys. We have new agency attorneys in this area. And so there was really just a changing of the guard. And in that, there was a loss of the collaboration and the way that we all worked together to kind of ensure that we knew what we were doing and kind of be checks and balances that people were following their roles. So adding the roles portion in was really important. It ended up taking about 45 minutes of my presentation, but luckily the presentation that I did locally was 4 hours. So it was really just a meeting of the minds. Even though it was a training on how we can improve youth engagement, it was also a time for us to come together and talk about some of the issues that we saw locally in our jurisdiction and what those of us that were present at the training were willing to do to remedy it. So I started out with national disproportionality data. And the reason that I wanted to do this was because when I started in 2016 as an attorney, nationally, the trend was that Black children are in foster care at a greater rate than white children. And so I expected to see that in this parish that I was in, and I didn't. And so we have more, in Louisiana, we do have more white children entering foster care. However, they exit foster care quicker, they have less placements, and they are more likely to find permanency upon leaving care. Our children of color do not. They don't have that. They have a lot of placements. They're unable to become stable, and they're the ones that are aging out of foster care. And so that's something that I've kind of looked at on the back end of my research to figure out, okay, what are we doing? But while doing MPLD, when we discussed disproportionality rates, and I went back and I went through all of the data that had been gathered, there was a jump from us just having Black to us having more than one race. And so I serve on our disproportionality committee for the state of Louisiana for child welfare cases. And this is something that we discussed in that committee. And so I wanted to bring it here. I am a person, I'm multiracial. However, I check the box as a Black woman. And so in the discussions on our disproportionality group, we asked the agency how they track what more than one race is, because our children's representation projects and our parents' representation projects, we check the boxes based on what our clients identify as. And DCFS is self-identifying the clients that come in on their end, and they're not rectifying that if the client identifies differently later. And so to me, this drop that we kind of start to see, and it's not a drastic drop, but we do see a drop of Black, and we see a spike of more than one race. And for the majority here, at least what I see in our cases that we have in our coverage area, that more than one race, they are biracial children that are Black and white. And so, who is tracking what the more than one race is? And are we really actually not having a disproportionality issue, or do we have a new one? And so that's something that we've talked about on our statewide committee. So here, to jump to my evaluation and my results from my training, this is the fun part. So in doing my training, the QIC-EY portion, I did not author that. That was authored already. I was able to just run the program. And so they included a reflective post survey at the conclusion of the training, had about 9 participants for that. And I have that data to share. And then for my live training, I did a reflective post survey to see if there was an increase in knowledge. And I have data from that from my live training in the 23rd, as well as the Louisiana Together We Can conference. So this is my QIC-EY reflective data. We had 8 participants fully complete and respond to the survey. So I picked a few key components that focused on really determining if they learned anything about youth engagement and what my focus of my PICO and my ARC were. So the importance of youth receiving notice of their hearing. 6 out of 8 participants strongly agreed. Then you have youth engagement ensures due process. 5 out of 8 people strongly agreed. Provided skills to better engage children and youth. 6 out of 8 participants strongly agreed. Improved my understanding of youth engagement. 6 out of 8 participants strongly agreed. So for me, this showed that the training was effective. To me, anything over the half is, I'm happy that they learned something. So what I was looking for going into it, there really wasn't an understanding of the importance of youth engagement. And there would be comments made to children's attorneys saying, oh, they don't need to come to court. They don't need to hear that. This is really hard for them. You know, they don't need to know that mom tested positive again last week. And these are young people who have rescued parents from addiction, right? And they know the history and the severity of the addiction that their parents are facing. And so keeping that from them, it creates even more detriment to them, because when they meet with the parent and now you or your volunteer has withheld information from them and their parent comes in and lies, and then they come to court and they hear the truth, then it creates an imbalance within the relationships. So the other one that really stuck out to me was youth engagement ensures due process. To me, that's a little low. Again, they're parties. So when we're not engaging them, we are not at all creating a form of due process, right? And we're taking the right of them to participate in their case away from them. And that is not at all what we should be doing as professionals. So this is the data from my live training. In total, I had 21 responses, and we went over the definition of authentic youth engagement. Pre-survey, nobody really knew what that meant. I think that was one person. Post-survey, 91% had a high understanding of what authentic youth engagement was. The importance of youth-adult relationships. 43% before said they had a high understanding. We got up to 91%. Authentically engaging youth. I gave some tips and some skills on how we can authentically engage youth and how we can authentically engage each other, right? And so that went from 43% to 86%. The ability to incorporate better youth engagement strategies in the cases from 19% to 76%. And then appreciation of youth input in their own cases. This one was really big for me. This one went from initially 43% to 86%. And so for me, this kind of the post-survey data really showed me that hopefully we were going to see a change, and that more youth were going to be coming to court, and that more youth were going to be participating in their DCFS cases, and that CASA volunteers would be using better engagement strategies that they've learned through this training when they're meeting with clients, and that also the attorneys would be using better skills, and DCFS would be using better skills with engaging. And so the audience of my training in my local jurisdiction, there were no judges, there were no district attorneys. We had a parents attorney attend, lots of DCFS staff, CASA, and children's attorneys, and a child's attorney peer support, which is a person with lived experience that helps us kind of connect our clients with their attorney and also connect our clients to the community and the services that are needed. And so I was very hopeful walking out of this training. And then from the survey results, we also stopped and paused because, again, we had 4 hours. So we stopped and paused, and we had just a dry erase board, and we talked about what are some strategies that we could incorporate? What are some things that we've done in the past that we can bring back? And who's willing to do what, right? Because a portion of that training really focused on roles. And so who's willing to step up and kind of do what they need to do in their role to get us back to where we need to be. So one of the first suggestions was to host more youth-centered events within the communities so that we can kind of meet youth in their environment and it not be in a courtroom or a DCFS office. And so that they can kind of get to know that the people that they see every day are regular people and not just the attorney and not just the social worker, not just the judge. And so from there, increasing communication with other child welfare partners. When we did this, we really realized that some of the disconnect for youth participating in their meetings is the attorneys are not being informed of when the meeting is. So how can we tell the youth, hey, we're going to be on this. Do you want to participate? CASA is not being informed of when the meeting is, or if they are, they're told when the meeting is, but it's not an invite. It's kind of like a told in passing. And so these were all things that we had a very open, honest conversation about. And we decided that, you know, if we haven't heard CASA or the attorneys, parents' attorneys and children's attorneys, if we haven't heard from DCFS, then we're going to take the initiative and reach out, because we know we have court upcoming and we know that things need to be done, so that we're not wasting time coming to court and just having to get continuance. And so that was really positive, and communication has improved amongst the partners. And then another suggestion was to give youth choices, such as the option on where to have their visits. So this was more so for the children's attorneys, DCFS workers, and CASA volunteers. So really reaching out to the children or the young people and asking them, you know, hey, for our visit this month, did you maybe want to grab dinner? Or do you want me to bring something with me? Do you want to sit outside? Do you want to go to this? And really becoming creative in the things that we do for our one-on-one visits with our clients, so that we're also exposing them to different things that maybe that they are interested in trying, but they don't necessarily know that they can ask for that. And then, of course, creating a judgment-free zone and be willing to compromise. At the end of the day, young people are very strong-willed, and they're going to find a way to do what they want to do. And so for us, instead of just saying, no, we can't do that, no, we can't do that, no, we can't do that, how do we find a way to say, okay, let's figure out what we can do? I don't want to tell you no, let's figure out what we can do so that we can get this done. And then an important one that is already working is to give youth tasks and follow up on the tasks at your next meeting with them, or on your next phone call with them, or, you know, if you're in contact via text them and check in on them. Hey, how is working on your job applications going? Do you need anything from me? Can I help? Do you need me to review them? You know, offer and kind of continue to give them that support. And then the biggest one for me that I shared with everybody was to create a seat for them at the table and really give them a voice. Don't just encourage them to come to court. Encourage their voice to be heard at court, however that looks. That might be you talking to their attorney and letting the attorney know, hey, I've met with them in depth. I have really good rapport with them. However, this is what I know about them, and they're really nervous and they're not going to share all of this in the courtroom. Can you ask for them to speak to the judge in chambers? Absolutely. Or, you know, if they want to be present and they're nervous, I was nervous my first time in court, but a lot of our young people are very hesitant about the judicial system, right? And so one of the other suggestions that I gave was to have them, yes, they can come, but if they're worried that they're not going to remember everything that they want to say, let's have them write a letter or have them write their thoughts out. And so if they forget, their CASA volunteer can read it for them, their attorney can read it for them. We can ask that the judge just read what they wrote. And if the judge has questions, they can ask them. And so we really talked about some very creative ways to really focus on ensuring that they have a voice in their court hearing, but also at the table in their case planning. And so that was very interesting. And we've seen already in the last 2 months, I conducted my training in October. In the last 2 months, we've seen an increase in youth participation in court, youth participation in their DCFS hearings. We've seen a lot of letters, and we've seen a lot of youth just calling their attorney and saying, hey, I want to talk to the judge. So I think that that's very important. So my next steps, as of now, I have been asked to do some live training in some of the different regions throughout the state by the child representation programs. DCFS is also potentially interested in kind of creating a youth engagement training that goes statewide. And so we've been in talks about that. There's a potential for me to write a research paper with the data that I've gained from Louisiana. And of course, I intend to share the data that I have from my program with the other child representation programs, the court improvement program, and DCFS. And we are a state that is big on bench books and bench cards. And we used our time in COVID to create a very, very thorough bench book. And so I would like to, we're getting ready to edit that. So I am going to volunteer to create a section on youth engagement and create a youth engagement bench card to go in with the other bench cards for judges and attorneys. And I intend to do that with our Louisiana Elite Advocacy Force, which is our statewide group of young people with lived experience in the foster care system. So in doing all of this and in having my next steps, another thing that I really looked at was some strategies to improve youth engagement from other jurisdictions and things that have been done by other people throughout the state. And so one of the ones that stuck out the most to me was, of course, Judge Gray from Orleans Parish. Judge Gray used to hold youth-led meetings in chambers where they focused on discussing goals and plans for the young person once they turn 18. And coincidentally, my peer support advocate that I hired is one of the youth that experienced these types of meetings. And so she really felt that they made a big difference in how her life turned out. And so that's something that I'm interested in incorporating into my live training and incorporating into suggestions. And then, of course, pre-hearing meetings. We have these in a lot of parishes, but the ones that I've seen the most detail in were Acadia Parish, and my mentor for this program, that's somewhere that she's seen them and she shared this information with me. And then LEAF, which I keep referencing, our Elite Advocacy Force, they've created a court prep form. My organization and my mentor's organization piloted the form. The president of LEAF is actually my peer support staff. So we are still using said court prep form, and we're working on them with, making changes to it as we go. And then, of course, just continuing to do hands-on training for child welfare partners, but also doing some courts host specific training for the partners in their courtroom so that they can set the tone for what is to be expected in that courtroom of everybody. And so I think that those are really important tools to kind of share that we have access to and ways that we can continue to make improvement on the system that we have. So in doing all of this, we also, MPLD partnered some of the fellows up and we created our own policies. And so in creating a policy, one of the fellows, Shonda, and I, both of our projects are on youth engagement. And so we wrote a policy on youth engagement for agencies. And it could be for a child welfare agency, it could be for child representation agency, it could be for CASA. And so we created a checklist, a checklist of what we should be talking about when we meet with youth one-on-one and when we're meeting with the young people, so that we're getting the most information out of them and, having that very authentic relationship be built. Because if you're discussing these things, it's really going to show that you care. And if you're following up about the things that you meet with them about the next time that you meet with them, then you are going to get a better response from them, and you're going to develop a better rapport. So MPLD's impact on me. This was a long year. I applied for MPLD knowing not a lot about the program. I interviewed for MPLD, and in my interview was told, you're the first attorney that we've had apply. We don't know how this is going to work, but we're going to try to make it work. We're going to see where this goes. And so coming into that and being the first attorney, that's a lot, right? It's a lot. Knowing that that's where I was, but also where I was at the beginning of this year to where I am now, completely different spaces. So at the beginning of the year, managing attorney, no cases, fully out of the courtroom, really just in a training capacity for the court and for my attorneys, and doing more statewide work. Fast forward, 2 attorneys are pregnant, and I'm going to have to go back in the courtroom right after I completed the training portion and I get ready to start reviewing my data and putting things together. So things got a little crazy, but I survived. And honestly, being able to have my check-ins monthly and talking to Miss Deborah and just talking about, okay, I got to pivot, I got to do this, I got to do that. And knowing that it's something that we all experience regardless of what state we were in, that really helped me to keep going. MPLD enhanced my self-confidence and gave me a better understanding of my leadership style and the leadership style that I guess, experienced from the people that came before me. And it encouraged me to return to a more collaborative approach to cases, which that's where I started. I came into this work and I was not an attorney, so I didn't pass the bar the first time that I took the bar exam. And I was able to learn child welfare from a different lens. I was able to kind of sit back, and I had to learn the law, and I had to prepare cases, and I had to go to any meeting that didn't require a bar license. I was at those meetings. And so people felt more comfortable talking to somebody that's not a licensed attorney. So it was very collaborative, like we were working together. And so once I became an attorney, that collaboration sort of stuck, and it helped us grow together as a jurisdiction. And so when somehow everybody that was involved in that switched into different positions, that seemed to have been lost in translation. So it really allowed me to go back to that work and start to train my newer attorneys in having that approach. Instead of just coming in and being thrown into the work, let's really focus on, building relationships and learning the different personalities in the courtroom and figuring out how we navigate and figuring out your space in the courtroom, because not everybody is going to be me and have the same approach. So figure out what your approach is and figure out how you work. So that is what MPLD has done to me. These are my references. So we know that I didn't make anything up today. And of course, I don't have any questions today. And this is my contact information. Thank you.